To a lowlander, looking north from Clydeside or west from Aberdeen, the Scottish Highlands rise like a great barrier, mile upon mile of mountain and moorland, of heather, peat bog and stream. In the northwest corner of this area, in Sutherlandshire, the scenery changes. Bare, desolate hills tower above an almost treeless landscape, scored and pitied by 1,000 lochs and tarns. Remote, primeval, the age-old rocks scraped and modelled by the glaciers of the Great Ice Age, it is called Garava, the rough or barren place.
Aye, rough it is indeed, but not everywhere so barren. We live here. These are our homes and our crofts, down by the sea there and around the waters of the loch. Our forefathers trenched and drained and made the land, and anywhere there's a bit of ground that a man can work, there you'll find our clachans, our small fields of crops, and our church.
Many of these little crofting communities in the Western Highlands are 60 miles or more from the nearest railway station.
Aye, and before they made the new road, it was 3 days by horse or 5 on foot over the hills to Lairg. But now we have the mail car.
Every day the mail car from Lairg comes over to Achrishgill, bringing letters and parcels, news from the outside world and stores for the shop. A son home on leave maybe, a fisherman on holiday, or a crofter returning from work in the towns.
Hello, here's Lachie Ross home on leave.
By Jove, and he's looking well.
It must be 3 years since he was home last.
Did you bring my scythe from Lairg, John Angus?
No, it wasn't in yet. I'll fetch it tomorrow if it's ready.
And Donald back for the clipping. Well, that's good.
Well, Norman, did they let you out from school already?
And here's Alec. He must have been promoted again.
Aye, he's an officer now.
Good for Alec. In small communities like this, what concerns one concerns all. It is rather like a big family, and everybody knows everybody else. Everybody knows John Angus Morrison, who drives the mail car. And everybody knows the postie.
Yes, indeed. We all know Jimmy. He's carried our news, good and bad, for 30 years now. He always likes to see us crowding round when the car comes in. It saves him a power of walking. And we all know Willie Ross. He's the secretary of our grazing committee. That's just a committee of the crofters that looks after everything to do with the cattle and the sheep. Then there's Mrs. Mackay up at the shop where the women buy their stores.
Oh, yes, we all know Judy Mackay. Roddy married her when he was away in Canada, working on the railroad. Vancouver, I think it is, she comes from. Oh, but she's quite one of us now.
Judy minds the shop, you see, while Roddy takes the van round to the faraway crofts, down by Shegra and Pollin and Old Chormore.
And the women don't wait to hear him toot twice now, but they're out with their baskets and over to see what he has today. And it's wonderful what he does get into that wee van of his. Bread and bacon and cheese, oil for the lamps, and sweets for the children. Oh, there's no end to it at all.
And then there's Janet Morrison up at the schoolhouse. She taught most of us, so we all know her.
But there's not half the number of children here that there were when we were at school. That's because so many of our folks have left the crofts and gone away to the towns, or over the seas to Canada or Australia, or New Zealand maybe, to find a living. Aye, it's sad to see them go, but you cannot blame them for it.
No, there's not half the folk about there used to be when Mr. McCaskill, the minister, first came to Achrishgill. That's Nurse Mackay he's talking to down by the church. I wonder now, where will it be she's off to in her wee car this morning?
Oh, it's to Mrs. Mackenzie, to be sure, down at Old Shore Moor, and we'll be hoping it's a boy this time.
Yes, there's room for more children and more people in the Highlands. It's terrible to think that little more than a century ago, thousands of crofters were driven from their homes in the glens to make room for sheep farmers and sportsmen from the south. The signs of that tragedy still lie heavy on the land. As a first step to make their homes secure, the Crofters Act was passed in 1886. This gave the crofters a fair rent and right of compensation. And now, none can be turned off his land at the whim of a grasping landlord. Encouraged by this and other acts, and with the help of state grants, the crofters began to build themselves new homes, solid two-story houses with stone floors and slated roofs. Then other help was given for the improvement of roads and piers, for drainage and for the upkeep of fences, walls and ditches. The post and telegraph services were brought out to the most isolated townships.
Oh, I'll not deny things are better now than when Geordie Mackay was a boy. But for all that, crofting is very much what it always has been. We have 3 or 4 acres, and we have to work hard to grow our few potatoes, some vegetables for the house, a patch of oats, some hay, and a few turnips for the beasts in the winter. And above the crofts, on the slopes of the hills, we have our common ground, where the sheep and the cattle are grazed.
Today the men of Achrishgill are off to gather in the sheep for the clipping. 5 times a year the sheep must be brought in from the hills. Then every man who is fit leaves whatever work he is at to join in the gathering. It will be a long, hard day, a walk of 30 miles or more, and a climb of 3,000 feet to the farthest peak.
We meet down at the big stone by Loch Straw, and there Willie sets the plan for the day.
You, Bill, and Alec, and Norman, you go by the south, and Duncan and I, and you, and Jock, will go by the north coys. Ahead lie the great hills, Foinavan, Crochmadder, Arkell, and scattered all over them are the sheep that must be gathered in before nightfall.
Danny, wait away, man. Way that out. Keep away out, man. Come by, lad. Come on in a bit. In a bit. Steady. Nice. Away, man. Head away, stop. Get away, lad. Way that out, man. Come on, idiot. Oh, hip to you. Come on, drive in. Oh. Turn right up. Nice. Come in a wee bit. Come on with that. You drive in that youse that's below you. There, Jock. There's some youse taking out to the top of the quarry. Then all right, my dog's on them. Bill, did you see the other fellows coming in from the south side? I saw Billy Calder on the shop. Come on, head a wee bit. Come on with them. Come on a bit. Steady on. They're coming down fine.
By the late afternoon, the high grounds have all been gathered, and the men, each with a bunch of sheep, draw together towards the road for the last stretch home. There must be 500 or 600 of them,
About 900 sheep all told, without the new lambs. But that's not enough between 14 crofts. We could do with as many again, but more sheep mean more land, and where are we going to get that from? What about the deer forests now? I'm thinking we could put some of that land to better use than sport.
Put up yours, man. Put up yours. Come on then, man. Come on.
It's been a long day and a tiring day, and they are moving very slowly now as they come along the road between the crofts.
Aye, but it's been a good day. The weather's kept fine and the sheep are all in. Hey, man, many's the time we've been right to the top of Foinaven, and then the mists come down like a blanket and we've had to give up and turn home again. Tonight the sheep will be put in the park, and tomorrow, if the rain keeps off, we'll make an early start with the clipping.
Everyone turns out for the clipping, and there are no idle hands on that day. Whenever there's a big job like this to be done, there's a grand cooperation. It's the welfare of the community that matters, and there are never any second thoughts about that. Each crofter clips his own sheep, which he can pick out by their marks, but if any of the crofters are away, or if it's a woman that owns the sheep, the others get together and clip their sheep for them. In small townships like this, help your neighbour is taken for granted.
Aye, yon's right enough, though I never thought to put it into speech before. It's just our natural way of doing things, I suppose. Well, after the ewes have been clipped, they must be freshly marked before they are let go on the hills. And then the lambs are let out to join their mothers. Oh, but they're happy to be free again. The fleeces are rolled up and put in bags to be stored in the shed. Later they'll go south to be sold and made into tweed. We'll get about 5 or 6 shillings apiece for them.
3 long, strenuous days have brought their modest reward, and tomorrow life at Achrishgill will return to its normal routine. After they have been milked, the cows are driven out from the byres. Every crofter keeps a cow or two to give milk for the house. In recent years, the Scottish Department of Agriculture done a lot to help crofters raise the standard of their livestock. Better cattle and more cattle mean more milk, better prices for cows, and an all-round improvement in the quality of the pastures and hill grazings, for the sheep as well as the cattle.
Aye, there's no doubt we have a better class of animal altogether now than we used to have, and thank the department for a lot of that. As the cows come out from the crofts, Neil and Lachie, if it happens to be about, collect them together and drive them off to the grazing ground. Then the women set to work. There's always plenty of work for them to do, in the house and about the croft.
Oh, yes, indeed. There's plenty of work for us. We must bring all the water up from the springs and buckets. There's plenty of it coming down from the hills, but never a drop laid on in the houses. And there's all the washing to do, more water to be carried up from the springs and heated over the fire. With 3 or 4 bairns in the house, it's sometimes as much as we can do to keep pace with it all.
Aye, I'm thinking that a good wife and sturdy bairns are the best help a man can have.
Oh, away with you. There's work to be done. The hens to be fed and the eggs to be gathered. The lamps to be cleaned and filled with oil. I wonder now when we will get the electricity that there's been so much talking about. And any time between May and September you'll be seeing us, whole families of us, with creels and turfing spades and all, setting off down the road to the peats.
The peat cutting rights, like the grazing rights, belong to the community, but each family works its own bank. In most of the houses, peat is the only fuel used for heat and cooking.
Aye, and there's a lot more work in getting a load of peats than you might imagine. First, the grass and turf must be taken off with a flatter spade. Then the peat underneath is cut into slabs and spread out on the bank to dry. It's just wet, soggy lumps when it's fresh cut, that you might think would never burn. So it must be lifted and turned and lifted and turned to let the sun and air dry it all through. And then, when it's fit to burn, it's made up into a big stack until it's wanted down at the house. Peat is just the roots of the heather and moss that has been rotting in the bog for hundreds of years.
But like everything else in the crofter's life, it has to be hard won from the earth with his own 2 hands. As a rule, the croft by itself gives no more than a bare livelihood, and most crofters depend upon some other work to help them out.
Yes, and we must take what comes. Sometimes it's gillying at the shooting and fishing, like Jock Mackay does. There's a fine thing for you, passing on our skill and craft to the visitors who come up for our fish and game. At other times it's road making or contract work for the government, laying telegraph poles, building bridges and such. We helped to make the new roads here ourselves, and now we have the job of keeping them in good repair. Or it may be a bit of joinery. Here's Billy Calder come to put a new timber in Alec Campbell's boat.
But whatever the job to be done, a wheel to be straightened, a house to be built, a plough to be mended, there's no one but themselves to do it. And like all people living far from cities and shops, the crofters learn to be resourceful and self-reliant, able to turn their hands to anything.
Yes, there's not much we cannot make a shape at, on the land and on the water too. I remember when we spent as much time at sea as we did on the crofts. But that was before the big drifters came in. Now it's only the lobsters or a few haddie for the house that we go out for. Oh, there's plenty of fish out there, but it's a dangerous coast when the wind blows up from the west. Cape Wrath, they call it, and it's a good name for it.
But in this part of the Highlands, it's the sheep that the crofters depend upon for most of their money. And these Sutherlandshire hills, with their early mossing, breed some of the finest Cheviot sheep in all Scotland.
Well then, about the middle of August, we gather them in again from the hills to be dipped. At the same time, the lambs are weaned from their mothers. The ewe lambs will be kept to replenish the flock. The male lambs will go to Laird Market to be sold.
Oh, it starts heading. Come on, put them through the gate. Come on with them, Laffy. Come on, down them. Hurry, 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 come on, hurry, come on, jump with it. Come on, come on, come on then. Shall I go on, old man? Get on. Come on, hurry, hurry. Come on, hurry, hurry. They're running free. Come on then. All right, boys, the fun's full. Stand by there, boys. Come on. Force them out. Hurry, 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 hurry. Hurry. Go on there. Go on, Ben. Force them down. Come on. Turn them out. Go on, come on. Come on. Tear them down. Tear them down, boys. Down with them. Right on. Go ahead. Very good. Come along. Turn it. Force them through, boys. Come along with them. Turn it right down. Put it down. That's the step. Come on with them. Come along. Come on, Jock. Give them a good dip. Put them right down, Jock. Put them right down. Hey, they're too cram. That's better. That's better. Tell them on. Tell them on. Oh, they're getting a, that's a, they're getting a good dip, all right. Now you're in a pitch there. Get down, man. Push them down. Go away, Ben, man. Go away. Get it away, man. Come on. Right. North to the hill. Stand by, boy.
After the ewes have had 3 crops of lambs, that's when they're 5 years old, they'll be cast and sold. And there'll be keen bidding for them from lowland farmers, for even after they've served their day on the hills here, our ewes are good for another 2 or 3 years breeding in the milder climate of the south.
But for the men, there's no rest yet, for by now the hay is ready and waiting to be cut. Crofters are a fine people, hardy and independent. They have not always been justly treated in the past, but they have survived, and by simple means they have served their land well. With a vigorous policy of land improvement, we can increase the scale of their activities, with better cultivation, more livestock, better implements. Much has already been done, but more is needed, and it is right that their future should be secure. For these people, hard-working, kindly, cooperative, give us sturdy citizens that we could ill afford to be without.